Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. Our guest speaker for today is Dr. Cornelia Rempel. She is a data research. She has already joined. I request her to please raise a hand so that I can join her into the panelist. Dr. Cornelia Rempel, you may unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you.
Hello. Welcome you.
Yeah, thank you.
Today is the inaugural session of this 10 days World Soil Day program that we are conducting. We are very happy to have you on board.
Okay. Yeah, I'm very happy. Thank you for the invitation. I'm very happy to be with you and to share some of my thoughts with you. And I am glad that the system worked. There was some problems.
That's great. Thank you. We have had a huge response from our participants. So what we decided to have live streaming on YouTube. So we are putting all of our lectures on YouTube streaming as well.
Okay.
So before we could proceed, you start your presentation. I would request our professor, Dr. Javed Ahmad Wani Saab, to share a brief introduction about our speaker. Yeah, Dr. Javed Ahmad Wani, please go ahead.
Okay. Mic not working, sir.
Just a minute. Thank you, Shilab. It is my privilege, my honor to introduce our first speaker of this event, Dr. Cornelia Rempel, PhD Habil, DRI, CNRS. And we are thankful to her that she has agreed to deliver the first lecture rather, today and refresh our mind with her knowledge. Before she will start, I would like to introduce her with all the panelists or online listening to us. Dr. Cornelia did her habilitation in geochemistry in 2006, and the title was Stabilization of Organic Matter in Soils, Chemical Recalcitrance versus Interaction with the Mineral Phase. Then she did her PhD in Soil Science from Brandenburg University of Technology, Cottbus, Germany. And she achieved this degree with the highest distinction. In 1994, she did the diploma in forestry from Ludwig Maximilian University of Munich, Germany. She has got a vast professional experience behind her. From 1995 to 99, she was the research scientist at the Brandenburg University of Technology, Chair of the Soil Protection Recultivation, Cottbus, Germany. From 1999 to 2000, postdoc at the Brandenburg University of Technology, Chair of the Protection and Recultivation, Cottbus, Germany. 2000-2001, postdoc at the Chair of Soil Science, Technical University of Munich. 2002 to 2008, first-class researcher at the Centre National di Ricerche Scientifiche, CNRS. And since 2008, Director of Research, second-class DRT at the Centre National di Ricerche Scientifiche, CNRS. 2010 to 2014, Group Leader, Soil Organic Matter Group at the Biomco Laboratory, Thaïvirval, Grignon, France. Since 2015, Group Leader, Paris Soil Organic Matter Group at the Institute of Ecology and Environmental, IEES, Thaïvirval, Grignon, France. Then since 2006, Director of Research, First Class DRI at the Centre National di Ricerche Scientifiche. A very one of the eminent scientists, that is, I can say, Dr. Cornila with us. No, she has received so many awards and nominations. And so far as the student supervision is concerned, she has guided about 18 PhD students, 3 are ongoing, 15 successfully completed, 8 postdocs, 27 master's projects, and 28 visiting students. And she is also the member of the editorial board of 6 eminent journals. That is the editorial board of Soil Science, editorial board of Geoderma, associate editor of Earth Surface Dynamics, topic editor of Soils, editorial board of Agronomy since 18,000, section editor in chief, editorial board of Journal of Plant Nutrition and Soil Science, editorial board of Soil Biology and Biochemistry. A vast experience again, that it is we are very fortunate that we have today this Dr. Cornila Rompel, who will be delivering the first lecture of this awareness program, which we are conducting for 10 days. So today is the first day and the first lecture by Dr. Cornila Rompel. Thank you a lot. Very much that you have come and you have given your consent and you are going to deliver the first lecture. Thank you very much. Thank you. Over to Shabir.
Thank you, Professor Jayad Madhawani, for giving a brief introduction about our guest speaker. Now, without wasting time, I would request Dr. Cornelia Rempel to please share her presentation and start the webinar.
Can you see?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to deliver this presentation and to celebrate the World Soils Day with you. Also, thank you very much, Dr. Wani, for this very nice introduction that you gave about me. So, as you all are now aware, I'm a research scientist at the CNRS, and I'm working in Paris, in France. My group just moved to Paris, and our lab is now there, and I'm part of the Institute for Ecology and Environmental Sciences in Paris, and I'm also, as you know, or maybe you don't know, I am the head of the scientific and technical committee of the 4 per Mill initiative. I will talk to you later about this initiative. It's an international one, and it's really putting the soils and soil organic matter in the center of everything. So this is everything about the quality of soils and soils. The soil quality is really important for many co-benefits. The organic matter in the soil is determining most of the properties that are responsible for this quality, and therefore I would like to talk to you about the benefits and the trade-offs of organic matter, organic carbon sequestration in soils. To give you a short overview about this subject. So now soils provide many ecosystem services. It's especially the microorganisms and the soil organic matter are very important in the soil, and the agricultural management like fertilization, tillage, irrigation, and crop species, and also grazing, they are impacting this system. And so soils provide provisioning services as food and fiber, water, energy, biodiversity, and also energy for the microbial functioning, but also for the human activities. So the soils has many regulating services. So it influences the climate. It can mediate natural hazards. Soils, they influence the environmental quality by the retention of pollutants, and also by influencing the biodiversity of the soils. And soil has also provisioning supporting services in terms of primary production, decomposition, and it supports nutrient and water cycling, and also the soil formation. So the soil functioning is highly depending on the biogeochemical cycling of carbon and also of other elements. And this cycling of these elements and the biogeochemical functioning of the soil depend, in fact, the quality of the human life through this provision of all these services that are derived from the soil. So we have some very grand challenges, as you know. So we have the population growth, that there will be in 2050 there will be 9 billion of people, and so this population growth requires increased agricultural production, and as we get about 95% of all our food calories from the soil, so soils they are really under pressure. So all the food that we eat and all the other commodities that we use, in the end, everything comes from the production of the soil. So life on Earth really depends on this thin layer of soils that we have. And so, it's unfortunate, but the land area cannot be expanded. We have only this one planet, and we have only the 12 billion hectares of productive soils that are on this planet, and this cannot be expanded. And many soils are already degraded, and they are low in soil organic matter. Also our world is facing many challenges. So the services provided by the soils, they are under threat. We have the global changes, for example, climate change, loss of biodiversity. There's a disturbance of global carbon, nitrogen, and phosphorus cycles. We have a lot of land use changes. So, and all these global changes, they also affect our soils. And so we need to adapt. Our management practices have to adapt. Our way of living, of consuming, has to be adapted in order to ensure the food security, to preserve or to improve the ecosystem services, and also to build a 21st century bioeconomy. So now, as I told you, that much of the soil quality parameters, they rely on the soil organic matter. So I would like to draw your attention to the fact that soils are the biggest carbon reservoir on continental surfaces, and that even small changes in this big reservoir can influence atmospheric CO2 concentrations. And so increasing carbon sequestration in soils is one possibility to contribute to climate change mitigation, because we remove, by storing carbon in soil or sequestering carbon in soil, we remove CO2 from the atmosphere. And by putting this carbon into the soil as in the form of soil organic matter, so we improve the soil quality, and we improve the adaptability of the ecosystems that the soils support, and we also improve the agricultural production and therefore increase food security also at the same time. So, so therefore, carbon sequestration in soils is really important. And when you put the soil organic matter in form of carbon into the soil, then you increase many other functions. So intensive agriculture leads to the decoupling of the biogeochemical cycles. As we have the biogeochemical cycles, that's the plant, they put the carbon into the soil, and the microbial biomass is decomposing and mineralizing soil organic matter to provide nutrients to the plants, and the plants assimilate CO2, and microorganisms, through its decomposition, they release CO2. So, however, our agricultural activities, they decouple these cycles. So the harvesting removes the carbon input into the soil, so microbial biomass has less energy. We have the fertilizers that put nutrients into the soil, and we have also the tillage that affects, and the use of agrochemicals, which may decrease the microbial diversity. So, and this affects, of course, so the release of the greenhouse gases, CO2 and N2O, and also may lead to some water pollution when nitrate or phosphates are released. So when we lose soil organic matter, we have a decline in soil quality, and there may be release of greenhouse gases that lead to climate change, and also release of nutrients that lead to decline in water quality. And yeah, unfortunately, we already lost a lot of soil carbon since the beginning of agriculture. The agriculture has really a strong impact on soil organic matter, and when native land or virgin land is put under agriculture, then carbon is lost. And this is a study from Sanderman from 2017 that showed that soil organic, that there's a carbon depth, that since the introduction of agriculture, soils lost a lot of carbon. And this historical carbon loss amounts to 133 gigatons. So, and this carbon that is lost from the soil accumulates in the atmosphere, where it contributes to climate change. And soils impoverished in carbon, so they have less soil organic matter, they lose most of their functions, they are less fertile and less resilient to extreme events, and also prone to erosion. So now there is hope. So we can reverse this trend to rebuilding soil organic matter stocks by adaptation of better management practices. And these practices, they can lead to increase at a specific rate, but they may increase to the state the soil had before the agricultural introduction, so they can reach the maximum potential. And when we want to overcome this maximum potential of the soil to store carbon, then we need some innovative technologies. And if we want to further increase, so the young people, they have to think about some more innovative technologies. So there may be some problems when we increase the carbon in the soil. There may be a saturation of the soil, that the soil is a debate in the literature, which carbon forms need to be increased, and if the carbon if the soil can saturate in carbon, and that would no longer be possible to further increase. There may be some breakthrough technologies that can be developed, and also, but we need to consider that there's climate change, and so this might affect the carbon storage potential in the soils. And and there may be benefits of this carbon sequestration, and that's for sure. About everything what we know, what's written in the textbooks, we have these benefits, but we don't really know quantitatively how they in what form do they occur, and we need to quantify these benefits in order also to convince people that it's good to store carbon in the soil. But the carbon sequestration may also have trade-offs, and it's also important to assess these trade-offs when we want to store the carbon in the soil. So how do we increase the soil organic carbon sequestration? There are we know the practices. They may, it's mainly agroecological practices that they can increase the soil organic matter and also soil health. So known practices are cover crops, conservation agriculture, integrated soil fertility management, agroforestry, and also organic fertilization in form of compost or biochar. So the most important thing when we want to increase the carbon sequestration in the soil is that we have to increase the inputs. And also it's important to reduce the periods with bare soil. So we have to stop erosion and stop the decomposition when the soil is bare. We have to increase the plant-derived carbon input, and we can also use maybe addition of exogenous organic matter. So now I come to the benefits of soil organic carbon sequestration. We have some benefits in terms of plant, the functions are in terms of plant nutrition, pollution control, and also the resilience of the system. All these benefits, they are related to the functions that soil organic matter has. Soil organic matter has chemical functions. It influences the cation exchange capacity, complexes cations, and pH buffer. These may influence these three functions that are benefits that I reported before. Then we have the biological functions. Soil organic matter is a nutrient reservoir, and in terms of nitrogen and phosphorus, it's also an energy source for the microbial biomass. And so soil organic matter storage enhances these microbiological functions. It also enhances microbial biodiversity and plant nutrition. Then soil organic matter has also physical functions, as it improves the soil structure, the infiltration, and the water holding capacity. So we have erosion control and a more resilient system. And therefore, increasing soil organic carbon sequestration in soils could lead to increasing yields, higher biodiversity, and increased resistance to extreme events like drought, for example. So, but the scientific evidence for the quantitative outcome of these quantitative effects of increased soil organic matter storage or carbon sequestration is scarce. So there may also be trade-offs of soil organic carbon sequestration in terms of biological functions. This would be methane and N2O emissions, especially under anaerobic conditions. So when we have more organic matter in the soil, then these emissions may be more frequent. And also we can have trade-offs in terms of physical functions, as soil organic matter increases the albedo and thus the energy uptake of the systems. So the trade-offs must be taken into account, especially when we want to sequester soil organic carbon for climate change mitigation, because methane and N2O are much more climate relevant than CO2. They have a global warming impact that is much higher. The methane it's 40 times higher than CO2, and N2O it's 280 times more important in terms of global warming potential. So these trade-offs must be taken into account. So the objective of my talk is to provide quantitative scientific evidence of the relation between soil organic carbon sequestration and potential benefits and trade-offs, to identify knowledge gaps and to show management impacts on soil organic carbon sequestration benefits and trade-offs in terms of climate change mitigation. So soil and physical parameters. Agricultural soils, this is a study, it comes from India. So the authors, they investigated agricultural soils with contrasting fertilization strategies, where they could change the soil organic carbon content. And this change in the soil organic carbon content is strongly related to the infiltration rate, and also to the aggregate mean weight diameter size. And so they concluded that increasing the soil organic carbon content favors the infiltration and also the aggregate formation, and leads thus to soil structure improvement. How does this now translate to soil organic carbon and drought tolerance of the system? Because soil organic matter improves the water and the soil structure, and probably also the water storage capacity of the soil. So there is a study from Japan that's a global study. They used a lot of data from all over the world, and they identified drought yield gap. So, and not yield gap, drought tolerance gaps. They used global data, to investigate these the yields that are due to yield loss due to this drought tolerance gap, and they found that this is related to the soil organic carbon content. And further, they quantified these the dry yield average economic output that might be that is occurring under the current drought tolerance, and if this drought tolerance gap is closed, so that you can see that farmers might increase their yields when they increase the soil organic carbon storage, and the additional storage that would be needed to close the yield gap, it must be increased between 9 and 26%. So we can see from the study that if we increase the soil organic carbon in the soil, then this may have effects on the drought tolerance of the system, and especially of the yield stability. So this is was quite a statistical, relatively theoretical study. Another study that went into the confirmed somewhat these findings was the study from China, where Pan et al. They showed that yields during the period from 1949 to 1989 are strongly related to the mean soil organic matter content, and that also when you have more carbon, higher soil carbon content, that the yield variability is decreased. And so these authors concluded that that the 1% increase in soil organic matter on average would lead to an increase of the total cereal productivity of 0.43 tons per hectare, and to a decrease in yield variability against disturbance by 3.5%. So this is further studies also showing that putting soils carbon in soils is important. Is a global meta-analysis of the CO2 concentrations and wheat and maize yields. The study from Oldfield, using the global data set, showed that yield increases with increasing soil organic matter, but that these yield increase levels off at about 2% of soil organic carbon in the soil. So 2% might be a threshold, and they also concluded that it is still important to increase the carbon content of the agricultural soils, as 2/3 of the cropland with maize or wheat are below this level. So there is a high potential for increasing yields by increasing soil carbon. Another outcome from the study was that they obtained higher yields with the same N fertilizer input in organic matter rich soils. So you see here it's the N input plotted against the yields, and you see when that you can, when you have the same N input, then you can see that you have higher yields when you have 2% soil organic matter as compared to 0.5 soil organic matter. And this is really very good news, because this reduces the trade-off between soil organic carbon sequestration. The cost, for example, is a trade-off, and also the N2O emissions, which increase with increasing N input. So this is quite good news. The other thing that we have to consider when we sequester carbon in soil is the question, shall we use it or shall we hoard it? So this was proposed by Janssen in 2006 already. So we have two actions that we can take to augment soil organic carbon stocks. Either we can increase soil organic carbon inputs, or we can reduce the losses. And we always can have the CO2 emissions and other greenhouse gas emissions that we have to take into account. And so when we store carbon, when we reduce the losses and increase the inputs, then we have then we reduce the microbial activity. We have lower mineralization rates, few microbial products, and few available nutrients, because the organic matter is stored and is not used. And when we have the carbon loss, then we have high mineralization rates, high microbial activity, many microbial products, and high available nutrients. So as you see, this is both processes of these processes are needed for the functioning of the agro-ecosystems and for the soils, because when we have high biological activity, then we have a good aggregation, and we have nutrients for the plants. And when we do not have this activity, and with the then we have low mineralization rates, but we have the carbon in the soil, and then we enrich the carbon in the soil. And so, both processes are important. So they have to be the storage as well as the decomposition of the organic matter. So both processes have to be reconciled. So that is very important to look at the role of microorganisms in the soil organic carbon sequestration. There are in fact two processes. The input of label carbon leads to priming of stabilized organic matter. When you have stable organic matter and you put high amounts of labile organic matter, then the microorganisms will at the same time use this energy to decompose the stable carbon. So this is the priming effect. And on the other hand, microbial products are protected and may accumulate to contribute to soil organic carbon. So carbon sequestration in soil may enhance both processes, because you have the biological activity. So you will, on the one hand, degrade the old carbon, and on the other hand, accumulate the new carbon. This is the turnover. So, and how to reconcile these two processes? There was a study on the Jena biodiversity experiment. So they have in Jena grassland with many different biodiversity levels. They have biodiversity levels from 1 to 60 species, and they assessed the annual stock changes of the soil organic carbon, and could distinguish between the old carbon that is lost and the new carbon that accumulated. And they found that when they have high species richness, 60 species, and they found the highest soil organic carbon stock increases. And this time it's a stock, it's not the concentration. And they also, so that they concluded that soil organic carbon stocks increases with plant diversity, and that in more diverse systems, we have also more microbial biomass and a higher microbial activity. And this leads to loss of old CE, but more new C input accumulated, resulting in more total soil organic carbon. So this is an important finding. So biodiversity has an influence. And also, when we look at soil organic matter stocks and productivity in Australia, these authors found that they have in systems where they have higher productivity, they have found also higher stocks, and they found the highest carbon, the highest carbon storage with the lowest turnover time in the most productive systems. And also the highest storage was found in the systems with the pasture. So the carbon sequestration in agricultural soils may have two benefits: sustaining microbial activity and also sustaining the agricultural productivity. So this is not is not an opposite. It's not the opposite. It's just a synergistic effect and not an antagonistic effect. So the biodiversity is very important, and this was also shown in this very recent study about soil organic carbon stocks and the invertebrate conversion. These authors then investigated 27 sites and assessed more than 10,000 individuals. And they found that the number of individual insects, as well as the diversity of the insects, is related to the soil organic carbon stocks. So this is another co-benefit of the soil organic carbon, increases the biodiversity of the system. So the relation between biodiversity and soil organic carbon storage is, it goes in the two directions. When you have a more diverse system, then you store more soil organic carbon, and this will also increase in turn the biodiversity of your system. So now I would like to draw your attention to the fact that the benefits and trade-offs of soil organic carbon sequestration may depend on the carbon type used to increase the soil organic carbon. So when you use biochar, for example, you may have positive effects on the water holding capacity. You may have a high soil organic carbon sequestration potential and long-term. It's a long-term. The biochar will will be very, it's not very available to the soil microbial biomass, and therefore it will not be decomposed and be stored in the long term. You have the microbial, you enhance the microbial habitat, and you may also have a reduction of the N2O emissions. However, on the other hand, biochar increases the albedo of the soil. It comes with a high cost in most cases. Biochar may induce, depending on its type, phytotoxicity, and also the soil fauna, earthworms, for example, they do not like very much the biochar. When you use compost, which is an easy decomposable substrate, so you have some soil organic carbon sequestration, not so much as with the biochar, but you will still have some when you add it to soil. You have a fertilizer effect, which you would not have with a biochar, because biochar contains little plant available fertilizing materials, and you will increase the biodiversity of your soil because you put in more available energy and nutrients for the microbial biomass. On the other hand, the trade-offs would be higher CO2 and N2O emissions because the material is degrading. You might have higher P and N loadings in the runoff. And also in some cases, when you put, depending on where the compost comes from, you have heavy metal input into your soils. So the benefits and trade-offs of soil carbon sequestration depend also on the pedoclimatic environment. So you may have, when you add soil organic carbon to carbonate-rich soils in dry areas, which then you have irrigation, you need water to increase the soil carbon because you need to increase your plant productivity with water. And there may also be CO2 emissions from the inorganic material from the carbonate that releases CO2 in the atmosphere. Also, you have trade-offs of soil organic carbon sequestration under waterlogged conditions, because when you put more labile carbon, then you might have, due to the high microbial activity and the redox system, methane and N2O emissions. So now I would like to talk to you about a study that we carried out in France to investigate the benefits and trade-offs of soil organic carbon sequestration as influenced by soil management. And so we used in this study temporary grassland, because land management should tend to smart agriculture, aiming to improve crop yields, soil quality, and soil organic matter storage, while limiting greenhouse gas emissions. And so it was suggested that the introduction of temporary or lay grassland into the cropping cycle could increase the coupling of biogeochemical cycles and soil organic matter storage, because during the grassland phase, you have the increase of the soil organic matter. When the grassland is turned over and cropland is installed, then you have a decrease of soil organic matter. But because you install the grassland into the cropping cycles, then it was hypothesized that you may maintain or even increase the soil organic matter of the whole system. But there is little information available on the legacy effect of lay grassland with regards to soil organic matter storage and greenhouse gas emissions. So the objectives of our study was to investigate what is the influence of grassland management on the benefits and trade-offs in terms of soil carbon concentrations and greenhouse gas emissions. And we wanted to investigate what is the legacy effect of temporary grasslands introduced in the cropping cycle. We had 3 different grassland management practices that we investigated. We investigated nitrogen fertilization and had treatments with or without nitrogen fertilization. We changed the duration of the temporary grassland. We had 3 years grassland or 6 years grassland. or we had grazing management, with or without grazing management. So I will not talk about the grazing management. We just looked at the mowed grasslands in this case. So this is our experimental setup. The experiment started in 2005. So you see, we had a control, a cropland control. It was we sampled in 2014. So the soils were 9 years under cropland. We had the temporary grassland where we introduced 3 years of temporary grassland with N-fertilization, temporary grassland with N-fertilization during 6 years, and also temporary grassland that was unfertilized. And we had the permanent grassland control that was nitrogen fertilized. You see a picture of the experiment. So it's located in Western France and was designed as a randomized block design. And we sampled in 0 to 10 centimeter depth for field replicates. And it's important that you notice that we sampled in March 2014, when the soil under the treatments was, all soils were, had been under crop 3 years before sampling. So it's really the legacy effect of the different grassland treatments that we were interested in. So the sampling occurred in 2014 after the cropland phase. So, and when we looked at the carbon concentration at these plots, and we saw that grassland is, when you have permanent grassland, of course, you have higher carbon storage than permanent crop. The grassland duration, 3 years or 6 years, had little effects on the carbon storage. The temporary grassland seemed to somewhat increase the carbon storage in the soils, but the duration had no effect. However, the N-fertilization, the absence of N-fertilization had a negative effect on the carbon storage. So in the first 10 centimeters, we concluded from this study that, from this analysis, that N-fertilization is necessary to store soil organic carbon. So when you want to produce something, because these grasslands were productive grasslands that were mowed 2 times a year. So then we looked at the legacy effect of grassland duration and fertilization on content and forms of hemicellulosic sugars. And we saw that the grassland increased the sugar content and also had some impact on the sugar origin. We saw that in grassland we had less microbial sugars, more plant sugars. This information we obtained from a molecular ratio of plant and microbial sugars. Also C6 sugars are microbial derived, and C5 sugars are plant derived on the right panel of the graph. So you see that in grassland, the sugars were more of plant origin. When we look at the temporary grasslands, at the legacy effect, then we saw that the duration of the grassland had no impact on the content, although it was increased somewhat with regards to the agricultural soil, and also had no impact on the composition. However, the composition changed with regards to the permanent agriculture. We introduced more plant-derived sugars. And without the N-fertilization, it was interesting to note that the sugar content decreased. Also, the fertilization had a positive impact on the content of the sugars and also the plant origin, because when we in the unfertilized treatment we found a higher content, higher contribution of the microbial sugars with regards to plant sugars. So these biogeochemical changes in the soil had also an impact on the aggregation. Here we analyzed we fractionated our soil. When you look at the bulk soil and when you look at the soil organic carbon in this bulk soil, on the left, the first points, so you see no significant difference, but when we fractionated, we saw that we had significant differences in the larger macro aggregate, in the macro aggregate fraction. So we saw that we had increasing carbon content of the macro aggregate fraction under grassland and thus and even under the temporary grassland. And therefore, we concluded that the grassland introduction in the cropping phase had as a legacy effect an increasing beneficial effect on the aggregation of the soil. So when the soil is aggregated, then it has a better structure, as you saw before, and it can increase the water infiltration and may also increase the water storage. So in terms of all the legacy effects, as we did a principal component analysis with all these parameters, we saw that, first of all, N-fertilization is necessary to preserve a typical grassland biogeochemical signature. Grassland duration showed no age-depending legacy effect on the other properties, and only after temporary grassland duration of 6 years, the soils acquired a biogeochemical characteristics close to continuous grassland, because when you look at the PCA plot, you see that the temporary grassland of 3 years and was still next to the cropland, and only the temporary grassland of 6 years with N-fertilization was in between the permanent cropland here illustrated by CC and the grassland, permanent grassland, which is GG. So now we had to look at the inputs of the system, and so we had root input, and we saw that grassland had a much higher root input than the cropland. So the carbon in the grassland is most probably increased because of a higher root carbon input and turnover. And we've also found that in the temporary grasslands, this is we have higher root input with regards to the continuous cropping. So, you have to take into account still that all temporary grasslands had been under cropping during the, in this in 2013, they had been 3 years under cropping, and still the root carbon input is still increased. So we have, in addition to this root input, we have also nitrogen input, because as I told you, our systems, they are productive. And it is interesting to note that for the grassland, we need much higher nitrogen fertilization, 170 to 380 kilograms per hectares per year. And with regards to the cropland, in the cropland, we need less nitrogen in order to sustain the production. And therefore, we have a strong trade-off in the grassland system. This is the legacy effect. The system is was under cropland, and we still find that we have higher N2O emissions under all grassland treatments which are N-fertilized. So N-fertilization has a strong effect on the N-fertilization during the grassland phase. Has a strong effect on the N2O emissions still after when the system is again under cropland, whereas when the grassland phase is not fertilized, then we have similar emissions as under the cropland. And so these trade-offs have to be considered. And in terms of mechanisms, we we concluded that permanent the permanent soil cover under grassland and the end fertilization leads to more soil carbon, but also more available nitrogen. This increases by the biomass production, when then we have a label plant-derived carbon input, which increases aggregation, and this also increases, again, has a positive effect on the soil carbon. But because of the label carbon and also more available nitrogen, we have a denitrification activity and we have greenhouse gas emissions. And as soil organic matter, microbial activity and greenhouse gas emissions are intimately linked, a compromise between the different ecosystem services has to be found. Production and climate change mitigation seems to be quite opposite. So what we have to find innovative fertilization strategies, for example, legume use during the grassland phase and low emissions organic fertilizers during the cropland phase, in order to decrease these trade-offs of the greenhouse gas emissions. So the benefits of organic carbon storage for climate change mitigation may be illustrated by a thought experiment. So maybe you have seen, as we have the annual global CO2 emissions from fossil fuels amounts to 8.9 gigatons per year. And we know that we have in global soils 2,400 gigatons of carbon. And so when you divide these two numbers, then the result is 4 per mil. And so this 4 per mil would be the amount that we need to increase the carbon stocks in the soil every year to offset CO2 emissions. So this is just a thought experiment, and it's the name of this 4 per mil initiative. This is a global initiative, and based on this simple calculation, in order to show that soil organic carbon storage is really important for the global CO2 concentration, atmospheric CO2 concentration, and the climate change. So, and that we should try to increase the carbon in the soil because we have these other co-benefits, as I showed you before. And so this increase may not be achievable everywhere. It's just an aspirational goal. And as I showed you, also may have some trade-offs. And one of the thing is that in order to be effective for climate change mitigation and to have an impact, these soil organic carbon sequestering practices must be upscaled. And so millions of farmers have to adopt these practices. And it was shown that the achievable potential in terms of climate change mitigation of soil carbon storage is about 1 gigaton of carbon and per year. And this is the emission of one big emitter, for example, as the European Union. So, and in conclusion, I would like to conclude that increasing soil organic carbon sequestration has positive effects on soil structure and water infiltration, on the resilience of the system to drought, that it may have positive effects on maize and wheat yields on a global basis, and also on the nitrogen requirements. So we have reduced fertilizer N input and may have reduced N2O emissions in turn. So it also soil organic carbon sequestration increases the soil biomass and activity, the agricultural productivity, and also the biodiversity. And the benefits and trade-offs of soil organic carbon sequestration depend on the organic matter type used as input and the pedoclimatic environment. And the soil management leads to legacy effects on soil organic carbon sequestration benefits and trade-offs. So, and also I would like to conclude that soil organic carbon sequestration may make a significant contribution to climate change mitigation, but yeah, we always have to keep in mind that natural climate solutions are not enough, and that we have to reduce the carbon dioxide emissions coming from the industry. And we need to dramatically increase the efforts in all sectors, including the agricultural sector. And for this, we need multi-stakeholder collaboration to establish a global soil organic carbon sequestration strategy. Yeah, this is the end of my talk. Yes, thank you for your attention. Sorry, I thought I had this slide to thank you for your attention.
Yes.
Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Cornelia Rempel, for such a comprehensive lecture on a topic like soil organic carbon benefits and trade-off. Now, I would request my colleague, Dr. Iqbal, if there are questions. Yeah, I think we have so many questions, but I would request him to ask selected questions to Professor Cornelia Rempel. Over to Iqbal.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Afternoon.
Nice to hear you. There are a lot of questions from different countries. First, I have chosen some questions for you, madam. There is a question from Pakistan. Zuhur Mujahid. He asks us, how can we convince our farmers to replace their cropland to grassland? We also know that their livelihood depends on the income from selling their crops. Madam?
Yeah, the question. So the question was, how can we convince the farmers to change their production because it relies their income relies on the management? Is this the question?
No. He is asking how can we? Yes, madam. Yes, madam. How can we convince our farmers to replace their cropland to grassland? When we know income depends on these crops. Yes.
Of course. So yeah, it's important. This is an important point. We need this need to be co-constructed with the farmers. As we have to work with the farmers and to look for solutions to if they use practices that are not really sustainable. And also what is an important point, it's also stressed by Ratan Lal a lot, on a political basis, yeah, we have to lobby, and the farmers most probably they need to be paid for the ecosystem services that they provide, and they cannot take the risk alone, as you said, because their livelihood depends on this, and so the crop insurance practices and also some subventions should probably be given in order to pay for the ecosystems that farmers can provide through sustainable soil management. Yeah, of course, we cannot ask the farmers to make all the effort alone. We have to support them. We have to work with them, and we have to make sure, that they apply practices that are based, on the last scientific knowledge.
Hope the question is answered. Thank you, madam. And now another question is from Dipantu Vainik. He is doing his PhD in agronomy from lovely Professional University, Punjab. He asks, ma'am, how buffer strips and zero tillage can help in carbon sequestration, and how the farmers will be benefited by that?
So no tillage is it does not really sequester. It helps. It helps increasing carbon in the upper layers. but it is more a redistribution of the carbon than really storage. But however, because it increases the carbon content of the upper soil layers, it would lead to a structural improvement, and also because you have the no tillage, and you would probably reduce the loss of the carbon. And the buffer stripes, when you have the buffer stripe, buffer stripes is usually used to uptake the nitrogen and the phosphorus that is lost from the agricultural soils, no? Is this the buffer stripe? And so when you install these, then you have permanent soil cover, and then you can also conserve your carbon in the soil. Yes.
The question is answered. Thank you, ma'am. Another question is from Muhammad Imtiaz Rashid. He is from King Abdulaziz University, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. He asks us why there are high nitrous oxide emissions in nitrogen fertilizer grasslands.
It's the nitrogen N2O oxide emissions. It's not really very well understood. The variability is high, spatial variability, and also the microbial communities involved have not completely elucidated. However, when there is substrate available in form of available nitrogen, then there will be N2O emissions. So this has many studies have shown that when you put the substrate, the available nitrogen, then the microbial communities will produce N2O. It's dependent to some extent on the soil pH. You can, when you have a higher pH, then you have less emissions, I think. So you have the possibility to influence the pH. And also we found in a recent project that when you have label carbon, depends to some extent on the composition of the carbon that you use as input in the soil. When you have label carbon, and then you have also N2O emissions. And it's not so much dependent on this was the outcome. It's not so much dependent on the soil microbial community compositions of the decomposers, but more on the carbon composition that you put into your soil.
Thank you, ma'am. There is another question from Rohan Chopra. He's probably from India. He has not. He asks us, can we use acidophilic organisms to regenerate polluted soils?
Which organisms? Can you please repeat?
Acidophilic organisms. Acidophilic. Acid-loving organisms. Acidophilic, madam.
Yeah.
Yes, acidophilic. Yes. He asks us, can we use acidophilic organisms to regenerate polluted soils?
Ah, yes. This is a question. Huh? This is not. First of all, it's not really my topic. It's not really my topic. Just I can maybe say polluted soils. You mean heavy metal polluted soils? Or they are.
He is not clear about that, what polluted soil he is talking of. He is not clear about heavy metals.
Yeah, this depends on the pollution, I would say.
Yes,
This would be the pollution where the acidophilic organisms are adapted to. Otherwise, in terms of soil organic carbon sequestration, when you have polluted soil, and it's more difficult to sequester carbon, as you influence your microbial community, and you may have microorganisms that do not degrade anymore, and so you would accumulate carbon if you have plant growth, because you have also difficulties to grow plants on these soils, I think. Yeah.
Thank you, madam. You have basically answered all the questions. Thank you very much, madam. Thank you very much. Thank you, madam.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Was a pleasure for me. Was a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you. So nice of you.
Okay. So then
Now, this one professor of ours, and Dr. Naira Fakirmani, he would like to give a brief feedback about your presentation.
Yeah, thank you. Me this opportunity. I thank you, ma'am, for your very nice presentation. The presentation was very good. The question answers were very excellently answered, but keeping in view the title, it's a very big title, and it could have taken us hours to discuss on this topic. But since you have studied a lot of things on your grassland and nitrogen fertilizers and how this can be for carbon sequestration, a lot of things we have learned from your slides. And since we have a lot of different issues in the developing countries other than the developed countries are, but you are that you have provided that management at a local level will be very excellent. Because you have to think on 8.9 gigatons of emission from fossil fuels in the future. You have to see how we can decrease and how we can sequester this carbon into the soil and thing. And I thank you for the presentation, ma'am. Thank you very much. Over to you, Chabir.
Thank you.
Okay, then, I think we are good to go. We will end here, and I thank you once again for such a beautiful presentation and for making our participants aware of this carbon sequestration and its trade-offs. Now, before we could leave, I would request everyone to please open their camera so that we could have a group photograph. I request everybody to please open up their camera. Okay, thank you everybody for joining us today. We will see you tomorrow at 3 p.m. I once again thank our guest speaker, Professor Cornelia Rampel, for joining us. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.